Is your ego wounded or healed? And how do you react if someone disrespects you? Do you defend yourself? Which one of these do you lead from? Before we get into today's message, hi, I'm 𝖬𝖆𝖎𝖎 and welcome to my YouTube channel. Please like, share, comment and subscribe, as it really helps me make more of a platform on YouTube. When your ego is unhealed, you have a fragile sense of self, and your sense of self is driven by insecurity, and you tend to operate more from fear and protection. Fear of how you're interpreted and perceived, fear of being seen as weak, and protective about how you come across to others to protect yourself and your emotions. When your ego is unhealed, you rely on the validation of others, which looking back, I never understood, because majority of the time, most people are unhealed. So you're looking for validation from people who are also unhealed and ungrounded. In reality, their opinion shouldn't mean shit. Do you know what I mean? Why would you go to somebody for validation of you who doesn't even know themselves? People who operate from an unhealed ego are quick to be defensive and are more reactive than grounded, and also hesitant to show emotion to not be seen as weak or vulnerable. An unhealed ego tends to be incredibly fragile, despite how it looks on the surface. Sometimes the loudest people and the most abrasive people are also the most vulnerable, and use the loudness and that personality and character as a shield and a way to protect themselves and mask how they really feel on the inside. It's why sometimes when I see people who have a reputation of being a big asshole or a dick, I always see that they're just wounded. Do you know what I mean? Like, I see them more for their wounded inner child than I do that character they're portraying online. I feel like there's so many hurt people nowadays wearing masks and then hurting other people with their platforms. An unhealed ego tends to struggle with admitting fault or apologizing for mistakes because they are protective of how they are perceived and how they feel about themselves. They can struggle to admit fault, so they tend to find a way to deflect or place blame on somebody else. Sometimes the hardest thing for them to say is sorry, because sorry is an admission of wrongdoing, and obviously they can't take any accountability. However, some people who have unhealed egos are overly apologetic or extremely apologetic and second guess everything that they do. This is how I used to be. An unhealed ego needs to be right because they get embarrassed when they are proved wrong, and they also get a mini dopamine hit from being right. I remember when I was younger, I used to get so irritated by people who were like that. Like, I'd find it really weird because it was like they always had to find a way to prove that they were right in some way. And some would go really overboard with it, and I never understood why. But as I grew up and gained more emotional maturity, I learned that it's because they get that little dopamine hit, you know, and they feel good about themselves. They need to have that, because me, I don't really care. I can be right about something, I can be wrong about something, it's cool. Whenever anyone has to overly be right about everything, it comes from a really unhealed place. Arguments with people who have an unhealed ego also tend to become more about winning rather than trying to understand the other person, where they're coming from, and have a resolution. To them, it becomes more of a one-upping situation and point scoring. The walls can go up very quickly with somebody who has an unhealed ego, and they can be hesitant to talk things through and instead find it way easier to hold grudges. People with a fragile and unhealed ego also really struggle with criticism, and the slightest bit can make them feel personally attacked. There is a lot of comparison when someone has an unhealed ego, and one thing I noticed as well, especially when I used to work in hospitality, was that a lot of people treat you like you're less than them. But I've always seen that as more of a reflection on that person. They need someone to feel better than. They need someone to feel better than because it soothes their ego and makes them feel better about themselves. Obviously it hurts when someone makes you feel less than, and someone like is talking to you like you're beneath them, or actively says, well, you're a fucking bartender, like what do you know? Like, obviously that shit hurts. But as I got older again, I was like, dude, you must be fucking miserable. Like, you must be really sad, innit? Because me, I don't need to make myself feel better than somebody. I know who I am, I'm good. And when I see somebody do that to somebody else, I just feel bad for them because they need to have that hit. Then it just didn't faze me anymore, because I was like, clearly you are struggling. and you don't feel good internally. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel the need to treat me any less than a human being. I just see it now as something to feel sorry for and feel pity for. And we had this really abrasive customer once a couple of years back who was like, you're all like the bottom of society. You all serve people. You're serving me right now. And I said to him, I was like, I don't think you realise how weak you look. You're trying to look like this big man, but you actually look really fragile because you're out here saying, I make 40k a year, I make Okay, cool. You know, throwing your Rolex about. Like, if you need to do those things to feel better about yourself, then I feel for you, you know? Whereas people with a healed ego operate differently. When you approach somebody with a healed ego, they don't need to feel better than another person. They know who they are, they're good. And with a person with a healed ego as well, they are a lot more open to hearing criticism. If someone with a healed ego is told that they've offended somebody, they can sit and hear that person out without getting defensive. It's basically the polar opposite to everything a wounded, unhealed ego does. But there was one thing that I was thinking about the other day, and I was thinking about how I would respond to people disrespecting me back in the day compared to now. Back when I was a teenager, if anyone was rude to me or disrespected me, I would be straight like, you can't talk to me like that, But now, I'm protective of myself, but it's from a different standpoint. I realised that me being protective of myself back then was not because I loved myself, but was more from a point of, I will not allow you to make you think that I'm weak. Like, you can't little girl me, you can't talk down to me. I'm not about to have you think that you can treat me like shit or that I'm a weak bitch. You see, that comes from more of an unhealed ego, whereas now it's more of a, I love and respect and honor myself so much that I will not allow somebody to disrespect me because I honor myself and I love myself. That's a healed approach to someone treating you with disrespect. I also don't feel the need to yell or to be loud to get my point across. I can just say things very calmly. Now I can just say, please don't disrespect me, and stand my ground calmly and respectfully. When you have a healed ego, you tend to not need validation from other people, and you can accept things about yourself without having to prove them. For example, with a healed ego, you don't care about how you are perceived by another person because you know yourself. And you know that those closest to you will know who you are without having to prove it or try and convince somebody to think otherwise of you. You know who you are and you have yourself. Your emotions are regulated. You don't really get defensive. You can accept feedback without feeling personally attacked by it. And you can prioritize truth over having to protect yourself and your ego as well, which is key. And also, you can take responsibility for your actions and apologize sincerely. And you can admit when you were in the wrong, or admit that you need help with something or don't know something. I feel like with the online healing community, there is a big emphasis on knowing it all, having it all figured out. And healing isn't like that. Healing is a journey. You can be healed in some areas and unhealed in next, or you can be healed but still figuring stuff out or having things pop up. That is completely fine. That is completely valid, and that is a part of healing. With today's video, I'd love to know in the comments below, what kind of ego do you move from? An unhealed one or a healed one? Take care, wishing blessings, and please like, comment, share and subscribe.